My name is Brittany. I was 25 when my graduation turned into a public takedown, starring my own parents. I'd waited 7 years for that walk across the stage. 4 extra semesters, 2 part-time jobs, and 1 emergency leave later, it was finally happening. And they almost made me believe they were proud. Mom had even texted me the night before. So excited to see you shine, Britt. We're all ready with our cameras. I should have known. The auditorium smelled like waxed wood and reheated coffee. Hundreds of folding chairs lined up in rows of polite panic. Parents, siblings, friends packed shoulder to shoulder. I spotted my sister Ashley near the front, curled blonde hair framing her perfectly symmetrical smirk. She waved. Behind her, Dad gave a thumbs up. I felt my throat tighten, but I smiled back anyway. We were the third department to walk. My major, communications, ironically, was sandwiched between business and creative writing. I was number 44 in line, long enough to watch Ashley be ushered backstage with a microphone and a clipboard. Family segment, someone whispered behind me. They're letting siblings speak this year. What? No one told me that. But then again, no one told me a lot of things. Like why Mom kept pushing for Ashley to present something special, or why Dad had asked for the name of my department chair just in case. The air grew tighter as names were called. One by one, students climbed the stairs to shake hands and pose with diplomas, while family members clapped, whistled, or wept. Then came the dean's voice. And now we'd like to introduce a special moment from one of our families. Please welcome Ashley Thompson, here to celebrate her sister, Brittany. The lights dimmed. Ashley stepped onto the stage in heels she didn't wear 5 minutes ago. She took the mic like she'd been rehearsing. Hi, everyone, she beamed, voice syrupy with cheer. I'm Brittany's younger sister, and, well, what a journey it's been watching her finally get here. Laughter. Already? I shifted in my chair. She's always been determined, like that time she accidentally emailed her professor an angry letter meant for me and then cried for 3 hours. More laughter. My shoulders stiffened. And who could forget when she changed her major 3 times? We weren't sure if we were funding college or improv classes. Louder laughter now, even some clapping. I caught Mom in the corner of my eye, filming, grinning, nodding along. Dad leaned toward the stage, chuckling. Ashley kept going. All the funny stories, all the quirky moments, each one slightly off, slightly twisted. I wasn't being honored, I was being made into a punchline by the people who were supposed to be my safe place. I sat frozen. The audience roared at her final line, something about me crying over a lost USB drive like it was a child. She handed the mic back like a queen bestowing grace. And as I walked up the steps to receive my diploma, the applause was loud, but my ears rang with something else. That wasn't love, it was mockery wrapped in glitter. And what they didn't know was that I had brought something too, something I never planned to use, until they gave me the perfect reason. The applause faded. The diploma in my hand felt weightless, like a stage prop, not a milestone. As I stepped off the platform, Ashley swooped in. Great job, sis, she whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear like we were on TV. You took it like a champ. Took it? I blinked. She was already halfway down the stairs before I found my voice. Who gave you permission to speak? She laughed. Oh, Britt, it was just a little fun. Mom cleared it with the dean. Everyone thought it'd be cute. Cute, right? I moved through the reception line like a mannequin, posed, smiling, robotic. The photos were constant. Flash, pose, hug, repeat. But under the surface, my thoughts sprinted. Mom cleared it with the dean? Since when did my mother have that kind of pull? Unless this wasn't spontaneous at all. The day wore on with a haze of forced joy. Friends hugged me. Professors shook my hand. One even said, "You've come a long way," like I'd just recovered from a scandal, not completed a degree. By the time I reached the banquet hall, I was no longer holding my diploma. I was gripping it. The family dinner was already in motion. Dad raised a glass. To Brittany, finally. Laughter again. My aunt chuckled. Even the cousins smirked. I looked around. My name was on the cake, but not in the speeches. Not in any of the photos on the centerpiece slideshow Ashley had put together. It was all her voice, her edit, her filters. Even the baby photos had been captioned by her, sarcastically. She always liked attention. One slide read over an image of me mid-cry at 4. Even then, another said beneath a photo of me holding up a homemade trophy, she was best at making things dramatic. I stood, quietly, walked out into the hallway of the event space, and finally let my breath fall out in one ragged, aching exhale. This wasn't an accident. They didn't just get carried away. This was planned. The sound tech booth was tucked behind a curtain near the staff prep area. I scanned the labels on the lightboard. Channel 4, backup mic. My heart stopped. The mic Ashley used had been hot before her speech. I'd watched the switch flip red, which meant they were recording. Someone was. I opened my bag and pulled out the portable recorder I'd kept out of habit, something I used during presentation practice and speech clinics. I never even turned it off. It had been on during the entire event, just in case I wanted to review my own speech later. Now it had Ashley's voice, every word, every scripted joke, but more importantly, it had the chatter before she took the stage. The setup, the coaching, the smug rehearsal. I replayed the first few seconds and heard it, clear as glass, Mom's voice. Keep it light, but don't be afraid to lean in. Brittany's used to it. Used to it? I pressed pause. Everything stilled. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining it. This wasn't just one moment of bad taste. It was a pattern, polished and delivered with applause. And they were proud of it. I slipped the recorder back in my bag and walked toward the banquet room. They wanted a show. I was about to give them one. But not yet. First, I needed to find the other voice I heard backstage. The one who laughed a little too hard before Ashley's name was even called. Because if this was a script, I was done playing the supporting role. The voice on the recorder wasn't crystal clear, but I knew it wasn't random. I played it again in the parking lot, sitting in my car with the engine off. The sun was low, casting those long shadows that stretch everything out like they're reaching for something. Just keep it short and sarcastic. That's her style, right? She'll laugh it off. She always does. That second voice wasn't Ashley, or Mom, or Dad. It was male, younger, slightly nasal, and it knew me too well. I ran through the guest list in my mind. Extended family, a few old neighbors, one or two college friends, but only one name clicked with that voice. Kyle, my ex was generous. We dated sophomore year, if you count him texting me at 2 a.m. and asking to hang after parties as dating. It fizzled fast. I thought it was mutual. Clearly not. Apparently it just went dormant until now. I scrolled through my contacts, found his name, still saved, and hovered. Then pressed dial, voicemail. Fine, I didn't need a confrontation yet. I needed information. Back inside the banquet hall, the dinner was winding down. People were milling around the dessert table. My diploma was being passed like a party favor from aunt to cousin to God knows who. Ashley was sitting on the edge of the stage, twirling her phone like it was a trophy. And Kyle, he was laughing with my dad near the open bar. Of course. I walked toward them, slow and steady. Brittany, Dad said too brightly. We were just saying how great the whole day went. Kyle turned. His eyes did that flicker thing, guilt dressed up as casual surprise. Hey, long time, he said. I gave him a tight smile. You were backstage earlier, right? He blinked. Yeah, just helping Ashley with the tech stuff. She asked me last minute. Last minute? Right. Did you help her write the speech? He laughed, but it sounded dry. Nah, just told her to keep it playful. Funny, I said. You told her to keep it short and sarcastic. I have the recording. Both of them froze. Dad coughed into his drink. Kyle paled. You recorded it? I always do. For practice, but now I think I'll keep this one. I turned before either could form a sentence. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was velocity. Let them sit in the shift. Back at my table, the centerpieces had been picked apart. My mom was gathering cards and trying to look busy. She avoided my gaze as I approached. That was new. Ashley, however, was radiant. Brittany, she beamed. How's it feel to be officially done? I looked her straight in the eye. I'm not done. She tilted her head, amused. You mean grad school? I smiled. No, I mean with today. For a split second, I saw something break in her expression, a crack. Then she laughed. Brittany, it was just a fun speech. Everyone loved it. I didn't answer. Just reached into my purse and tapped the recorder on the table, softly. Her hand stopped midair. I stood, adjusted my gown, and walked out of the hall. The night air hit like clarity. I didn't know yet how far this went, but I'd heard the rehearsal. And next, they were going to hear mine. The next morning, the party photos started popping up online like landmines. Tag after tag, me mid-blink, me mid-laugh that wasn't real, me frozen behind Ashley's spotlight grin. The caption stung worse than the edits. Our girl finally made it. Hashtag Thompson sisters. One of us graduated with style. One of us? Cute. But my fury wasn't for public viewing. Not yet. Instead, I drove to campus. Not to soak in nostalgia, but to collect what they'd forgotten. The tech building was mostly empty. Finals were over, students gone, but I still had card access to the media lab for another 2 weeks. Ashley had used one of the school's computers to prep her slideshow. I knew because I helped set up her digital media account last fall when she was too busy to figure it out. I also knew she never changed the password, she never changed anything. Inside Lab B2, I logged in and searched recent files. There it was. A folder named Grad Gold buried beneath layers of renamed temp drives. Inside, versions of the slideshow, drafts of her speech, and one labeled Alt Roast Final. I opened it, my lungs locked. Line after line of scripted jokes, pre-written insults with timestamps, even annotations. Pace slower here, let the audience laugh. Optional, mention Brittany's high school boyfriend. Use crying story as closing punchline. It was a script, not just improvisation, a literal script. I checked the metadata. File created 2 weeks ago, last modified 48 hours before the ceremony. I scrolled further. There were text captures pasted in, replies from Kyle, notes from Mom. My hand gripped the mouse harder. Brittany's reactions are always the best. She gets so flustered. They weren't just laughing at me, they designed the laugh. Even worse, they bet on it. She'll either cry or storm out. My guess is cry, but I'll bring tissues just in case. Ashley. I leaned back in the chair. The screen flickered softly in front of me, my own humiliation cataloged in bullet points and formatting notes. This was never about honoring me, it was about staging me. I downloaded everything to a flash drive I kept on my keychain, then deleted the folder from the desktop. Let them wonder. On my way out, I passed a student worker restocking cables. He looked up, startled. "You're Brittany Thompson, right? From comm?" "Yeah," I said, slower than usual. He scratched his head. Weird question, but did your sister mean to upload her speech rehearsal to the student server?" I froze. She what? He led me to another station, clicked through. There it was, an audio file labeled Ashley Read This Slow MP4, uploaded publicly by mistake to a shared class folder. The file wasn't just her reading, it was her practicing, mocking my stutter during freshman orientation, imitating my voice when I had a cold, calling me emotionally allergic to feedback. And then Dad's voice in the background, "Just don't make it too mean, you know how she gets." They really didn't. I downloaded the file, thanked the student, walked out of the building into sharp, clean morning air. They thought this was over. They thought graduation was the finale. But for me, it was just the pre-show, the recorder, the rehearsal, the files, the fake support. It all swirled in my head like a puzzle that had never belonged to me, just one I was forced to solve blindfolded. I didn't drive home that night. I drove to the river. There was an old bench overlooking the bridge, the kind of spot tourists found romantic and locals ignored. I sat there in my wrinkled gown, bare heels resting on concrete as the wind pulled loose hairs across my face. That's where I made the call, not to Ashley, not to Mom, but to someone who'd seen it from the edges. Aunt Denise. She was technically Mom's sister, though you'd never guess it. She lived 2 towns over, ran a flower shop, and showed up at holidays mostly to keep the peace. But she had a memory like a vault and a voice like a blade when she needed it, and she liked me. At least, I think she did. She picked up after 2 rings. "Brittany," her voice was cautious. "Everything okay?" "No," I said honestly, "but I need your help." I told her enough to quiet the shakiness in my chest, but not too much, just the surface, just enough for her to say the one sentence that finally made me feel seen. "They've been doing this to you for years. I always wondered if you'd notice." I closed my eyes. Of course she knew. "Did you know they were planning something for graduation?" A pause. "I knew Ashley asked your mom if she could make it funny, but I didn't think they'd actually let her go that far. Your mom, she likes to look supportive without doing the work." I bit my lip. "And Kyle?" That pause was longer. "I saw him talking to your dad at Easter," she finally said. "They seemed too comfortable, like old friends." My hands tightened in my lap. Denise exhaled. Britt, I'm going to say something that might hurt, but you need to hear it. Okay? They treat you like the dress rehearsal, and Ashley's the performance. The silence after that wasn't empty. It was filled with the loudest clarity I'd ever felt. I want that to change, I said. Denise didn't ask how, she just asked, when? Soon, she offered to help, with what I wasn't sure yet. But knowing I had one adult in my corner, one woman who saw the same patterns, made the air taste different. Sharper, useful. The next day, I met with my professor, Dr. Klein. He'd been the only one to actually mention my thesis during the ceremony. While others focused on speeches and dresses, he'd asked about my data set. I brought him the flash drive. He raised an eyebrow. Everything okay, Brittany? Not really, but I'd like to request access to the final event archive. He blinked. You mean the full commencement footage? I nodded. For personal records. And maybe something else. He paused, then stood and unlocked the cabinet behind him. You're one of the most methodical students I've had. If you're asking for something, there's probably a reason. He handed me a labeled case. Just remember, revenge is satisfying, but context is strategic. I didn't smile. Thank you. Walking out of the building, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry anymore. I was organized. This wasn't about getting back at them anymore. It was about showing them I knew the lines. And this time, I was rewriting the scene. There was one place my family never went. A place they avoided like it carried some unspeakable infection, though they'd never say it aloud. The community center by the railroad tracks, it wasn't dangerous, just humble. Honest, it didn't have chandeliers or catering contracts or Instagrammable corners, but it did have a small events room, soundproofed, cheap to rent, and always available on weekday afternoons. And for me, it held something more. It was where I took speech therapy for 2 years after my childhood accident, the one nobody in my family ever mentioned, the one Ashley mocked in her fake stutter on that rehearsal tape. So I booked it, I used the center's printed forms, walked them in myself, paid in cash. There wouldn't be any digital trace. I didn't tell Aunt Denise yet. She'd offered to bring flowers, snacks, even folding chairs. But this wasn't for ambiance. This was for acknowledgement. I sent one group text, just one, neutral tone, no accusations. I'm hosting a thank you presentation for graduation support. This Saturday at 4, please come if you're free. Ashley responded in under 2 minutes. Cute, hope you're not going to make us cry. Mom replied with a heart emoji. Dad sent a thumbs up. Kyle stayed silent. Perfect. Saturday came fast. I wore the same dress from commencement. Creased in the hem, but clean. No makeup, no script. Just my laptop, the flash drive, and a portable speaker. I set up early. One long table, 6 chairs. No name tags. By 3:45, the first one arrived. Ashley, of course. She walked in like she was about to be awarded again. Her heels clicked like applause across the linoleum. She hugged me tight, too tight, and looked around. This is retro, she said, lips curling. I smiled. It's familiar. She tilted her head but said nothing. Mom arrived next, with Dad trailing behind like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He held a grocery bag of cookies, like that would balance karma. I didn't ask about Kyle. At 4:03, I locked the door. Nobody asked why. I stood at the front behind the laptop and clicked open the presentation. But instead of my thesis slides, a black screen opened with one line of text. This time, I'm the one with the mic. Ashley's smile faltered. I pressed play. The audio came first, soft, then clearer. Her voice, laughing, rehearsing, Dad in the background. Kyle's half laughs, the words they'd written, the stage directions, the mocking, then silence. I didn't look at them, I just let it play. Mom made a noise halfway through, like she might protest, but said nothing. When it ended, I didn't speak. I let the room stay heavy. Then I stepped forward. This wasn't just a joke. It was designed humiliation, rehearsed cruelty, with participation. Ashley opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Not yet. I pulled up the next slide. It was a photo of me from my speech therapy days. 8 years old, holding flashcards, eyes crossed from concentration. None of them had ever seen it, because none of them came. This is where I started. This room, this center, while you were busy pretending my voice wasn't good enough to hear. I looked up. Ashley had gone pale. Mom was blinking too fast. Dad looked at the floor. I exhaled, slow. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for understanding. And distance. Ashley stood. You invited us just to shame us? No, I said, finally meeting her eyes. I invited you so I could speak uninterrupted. For once. The silence this time wasn't heavy, it was final. I packed my things calmly, opened the door. Nobody moved. They didn't leave with rage, they left with the unfamiliar weight of listening. I didn't leave right away. After they filed out, Ashley huffing, Mom fidgeting with her purse strap, silence hanging behind every pair of footsteps, I stayed seated, just me and the blinking cursor on the last slide of my presentation. No applause, no closure, but no interruptions either. It was enough. I began unplugging the speaker when I heard the sound of a shoe scuff at the doorway. I turned, expecting a staff member. It was Dad, still in the same tan jacket. Still carrying the now empty grocery bag, crumpled in one hand like he didn't know what to do with it. He hovered near the threshold like a man afraid of his own shadow. I thought you left, I said, my voice raspier than expected. I walked them out, he muttered. Came back. I waited. He stepped inside, let the door click behind him. Silence. Then he said something so strange, I had to blink to process it. I remembered the smell. I frowned. He gestured vaguely at the walls, the flooring, the folding chairs stacked in the corner. This place, when you were little, I'd drive you here after work sometimes. You wouldn't talk. You just held my sleeve like it was the only thing keeping you upright. That image knocked the wind out of me. He wasn't supposed to remember that. He wasn't even supposed to notice. He sat slowly in one of the plastic chairs, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. I should have stopped it, he said. The graduation thing? All of it. I folded my arms. You didn't even blink when she made that joke about my first panic attack. He flinched. She said you cried because someone corrected your grammar. You laughed. I know, he said quietly. Silence again. I didn't want to start a fight, he added. Not there, not in public. I laughed bitterly. So you let them humiliate me in peace? He didn't argue, didn't defend, just looked up at me with tired eyes. I didn't know how to protect you without losing everything else. The words hung. I wanted to spit something back. I wanted to make him feel the years I'd buried, but for the first time in my life, he wasn't pretending to be strong. He looked like a man who'd finally realized what it cost to stay neutral. You chose comfort, I said. He nodded. I did. I sat back down, not to talk, just to breathe. I'm not here for apologies, I said. Good, he replied. Because I don't have a clean one. We stayed there, quiet. Then he stood, reached into his jacket, and pulled out something small. A folded piece of lined paper, yellowing at the creases. I found this in the garage. It's yours? I took it carefully. It was one of my old practice scripts, probably aged 9 or 10. I'd written out dialogue from my favorite cartoon, trying to copy the rhythm, get the timing right. But in the margins, in loopy, uneven handwriting, someone had added little check marks. One word circled in red, brave. That was you? I asked. He nodded. I didn't know how to help, but I wanted you to know I saw you trying. Tears burned unexpectedly in my eyes. He turned to go. At the door, he paused. You were never the rehearsal, he said. Then he left. I stared down at the paper in my hand. Creased, imperfect, still readable. It wasn't forgiveness. But maybe, just maybe, it was the beginning of memory rewritten. 2 days passed after the community center. I didn't reach out to anyone. Not Aunt Denise, not Dad, definitely not Ashley. I kept the brave paper on my nightstand, like a relic too fragile to move. My chest didn't hurt the same way anymore, but the air still felt thinner when I thought about everything that had been said and everything that hadn't. Then came the knock. Not a text, not a call, an actual knock. At my shared co-working studio, Wednesday, just after noon. I was alone, finalizing my grad grant proposal, when the front door clicked and a face leaned in. Soft brown hair, denim jacket, holding coffee and uncertainty. Hey, Brittany. I blinked. It was Mason. I hadn't seen him since high school. We sat next to each other in junior debate, competed once at regionals, then drifted like most people do. He moved away sophomore year, and I'd heard he was in Chicago, maybe Denver. But here he was, standing in my doorway like no time had passed, just distance. Mason, I said, stunned. What are you? He smiled, sheepish. Saw the commencement stream. I was in town for my cousin's wedding, ended up at the ceremony, didn't know you were graduating. My heart skipped. You were there? In the back. You didn't see me. I almost didn't stay, but then Ashley started speaking. He paused, and I couldn't leave. 1,000 instincts kicked in: embarrassment, panic, shame. I didn't want pity. I didn't want nods and soft phrases about being strong. I didn't want to be anyone's inspiration story. But Mason didn't offer any of that. He sat across from me, set the coffee down, and pulled something from his pocket. A folded piece of paper. Another one. This one was a printed still frame. He must have paused the stream and printed it on a whim. It showed me at the moment I took the mic back from Ashley. The instant I'd said, "I'll take it from here," I was staring forward, chin raised, breath mid-inhale, frozen courage. "I kept it," he said, "because honestly, it floored me. The way you stood there, you looked like you'd been preparing for that moment your whole life." I swallowed. "I have," I said quietly. He nodded. "I didn't come to make it weird. I've seen fake confidence. Yours wasn't that." The silence was different than the one I'd had with my family. This one felt open. Not pressed by guilt, just air. "Why now?" I finally asked. He leaned forward slightly. "Because I figured if that moment meant something to me, a guy from 10 years ago, it must have meant a hell of a lot more to you. And maybe no one told you that yet." My throat tightened. No, no one had. Not Mom, not Ashley, not even Dad, not really. "You okay with friends showing up again?" he added. The smallest smile touched my mouth. "Depends if they bring coffee." He grinned. "Noted." We talked for an hour. About life, the weird turns people take, what makes us leave, and what makes us come back. As he stood to leave, he looked around the studio once more. "This space suits you," he said. "I'm still building it," I replied. He met my gaze. "You've already started." When he left, I stood alone in the quiet again, but it wasn't hollow, it was waiting. And this time, I didn't mind the wait. By Friday morning, I was breathing easier. The air didn't scrape anymore when I walked into familiar rooms. The mirror stopped feeling like an interrogation. I even started sleeping through the night again. But peace, like anything in my life, didn't knock politely. It arrived in the form of a misdelivered envelope. The co-working center had a small mail rack for regulars, tucked under the front desk. Mostly invoices, flyers, junk, but today, one stood out. Thick cream cardstock, gold ink, handwritten, no return address, no stamp. Just my studio number, scrawled on the back flap. I opened it on instinct, thinking maybe it was a local vendor. Inside was an embossed invitation. Ashley's engagement party, scheduled for next weekend. Full dinner, ballroom venue, RSVP by yesterday. At the bottom, in glittering script, "Let's celebrate the couple who make everyone else look boring." I stared at it, not because I was shocked she was getting married. That had been public since spring. Not even because of the over-the-top venue or theme. Ashley never did anything subtle. But because the invitation wasn't addressed to me, it was addressed to Kyle, my brother, and someone had clearly assumed this was his mailbox. There was no card for me. I checked twice, then 3 times. The realization came slowly. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I hadn't been invited, not just excluded from planning, not just given the silent treatment, but removed from the guest list completely. And the invitation had still found me. The irony was sharp enough to cut. I set it on the desk, staring at it like it might apologize. The font mocked me. The glitter smiled too hard. After everything, after the ceremony, the confrontation, the speech, they still saw me as an absence. A threat. Something to be left outside the velvet rope. I texted Aunt Denise. "Did you get an invite to Ashley's engagement party?" She replied instantly. "Yes, I assumed you were helping host." I didn't reply. I couldn't, because this wasn't about a party. This wasn't about cake or flower walls or curated playlists. This was about control, image, punishment. Ashley had taken the one thing I'd given her, the benefit of silence after the community center, and weaponized it, and the family had accepted it. Again. I sat still for a long time, pulse thudding, not with sadness, not this time, with clarity. They weren't interested in healing, they were interested in rehearsals, staging, appearances. And I'd already dismantled that once. I wouldn't waste another breath trying to be let back in. Instead, I called Mason. "I need a +1, I said. He didn't ask where, he didn't ask why. He just said, "Tell me what to wear." I smiled for the first time in an hour, because if they were throwing a party without me, I'd still be the headline. The venue was a restored mansion just outside the city. Three-tiered stone steps, crystal chandeliers visible through high-arched windows. Two valets in black vests stationed by a fountain that gurgled like it had something to hide. Ashley always wanted drama. Tonight, I was going to give it to her. Mason pulled up beside the valet with practiced calm, like we belonged to the type of life where limousines and white glove greetings were expected. I'd chosen my dress carefully. Not a revenge red cliche, not black either. That would have been too bitter. No, I wore pearl, soft, luminous, and surgical in its defiance. People stared before I'd even reached the foyer, not because of the gown or the man beside me or the deliberate posture I held, but because I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't in their script, and I wasn't following stage directions. Inside, the ballroom shimmered. Everything gold, everything sterile. Towering centerpieces of orchids and fake butterflies. A string quartet near the bar, polite laughter echoing under chandeliers like it had been rehearsed in a mirror. We entered just as the coordinator was announcing dinner service. Tables turned, Ashley turned, and her face cracked. Her eyes scanned me top to hem, flicked to Mason's arm, then sharpened like a hawk catching movement in grass. I didn't break gaze. Not when Mom's mouth fell open, not when Kyle shifted nervously 2 seats over. Not when the entire back row, those same cousins who hadn't returned my texts since graduation, sank half an inch lower in their chairs. I didn't blink. I glided. Mason and I took the 2 seats at the very edge of the table Ashley had clearly designated for distant relatives and awkward plus ones. The kind of table you filled last, hoping no one important would land there. Perfect. I made sure I faced the head table. Ashley stood and walked over. Every heel click felt like a gun cocking. She leaned in. I don't remember sending you an invitation. I smiled lightly. Funny, I remember not getting one. She narrowed her eyes. So why are you here? I didn't lower my voice. Because it's a celebration, and we both know I'm the most interesting part of it. A few nearby heads turned. Ashley's smile faltered. You think this is going to scare me? She hissed. You showing up like this? It's pathetic. I tilted my head. Then don't be scared. Before she could fire back, the speaker system clicked. The MC called for toasts. She was summoned. Ashley had to return to her seat. And for the next 20 minutes, while people clinked glasses and exchanged stories about the beautiful couple, her gaze kept flicking toward me. Not Mom, not even Dad, just me, because I wasn't quiet anymore. I wasn't afraid to occupy space. And deep down, she knew the party had already shifted. This was no longer her night, it was mine. The clink of cutlery quieted. Aunt Rochelle gave a toast that was mostly adjectives. Dad's toast felt recycled. He used the same one at Kyle's graduation, just swapped names. Then the MC returned with a grin too wide to be sincere. And now, he said, glancing at a card, we have a few words from Mason Hart. Ashley's expression shattered like porcelain. She hadn't approved that. I turned slowly to Mason. He hadn't told me, he hadn't asked. But he stood up smoothly, adjusted his cuff, and accepted the mic like it belonged in his hand. Thanks, he said, voice even, tone casual. I wasn't planning to speak tonight, but when I realized how many familiar faces were in one room, I thought, why not say something real? Several heads tilted. He walked to the center of the floor, mic in one hand, the other tucked in his pocket. I've known Ashley since high school, sort of, through people. She's the kind of person you remember even when you're trying to forget. A few stifled chuckles. Ashley's smile was frozen. But the truth is, Mason went on, this isn't about Ashley. Now silence. This is about someone who wasn't on the invitation list, someone who wasn't in the photos on the screen, someone who helped build this family's name, even while the rest of you tried to erase hers. My skin chilled. He looked directly at me, not as a performance, as recognition. I won't get poetic. I just think, when a person rises without a cheer squad, without family resources, without the spotlight, when she builds something from air and grit and silence, that deserves more than a seat at the edge of the table. People stared. Mason didn't flinch. And if you're wondering who I'm talking about, look to the only one here who didn't need a microphone to command the room. He handed the mic back without waiting for applause. There was none. Just a suspended silence thick with embarrassment, confusion, and something else. Shame. Ashley didn't move. Her fiancé looked down at his plate. Mom reached for her wine glass like it might hide her. Mason returned and sat beside me. I didn't say anything. He didn't need me to. Because that wasn't about making a scene. It was about ending one. For the first time all night, the music felt like background. The decorations looked cheap. And the party Ashley had planned to showcase her control, now existed only to highlight what she couldn't contain. Me, and the people willing to speak for me when her voice had tried to drown mine. I sat a little straighter, because tonight hadn't ended, it had just changed ownership. Ashley stood like someone had yanked a string in her back. She walked stiffly to the center, heels clacking too loud, dress rustling like threat. A few guests clapped weakly, unsure if they were allowed to relax again. She took the mic from the MC without thanks. And didn't look at Mason, didn't look at me, only stared into the middle of the chandelier above us, like she needed to anchor herself to something shinier than reality. I wasn't expecting that, she said with a tight laugh. The room tensed again. I guess we're just handing out tributes tonight? Her smile was brittle. It's beautiful, really, to see people lift up others who need a little extra attention. The barb landed, but not like she thought. It didn't slice, it thudded, and the sound of it, jealousy dressed in courtesy, shifted the air. A few people exchanged glances. Aunt Rochelle straightened in her chair. Even Mom's fork paused midair. Ashley kept going. I mean, family's complicated, right? We all make mistakes, say things we shouldn't. But at the end of the day, events like this are about joy, about unity. She looked directly at me now. And about knowing your place. My breath stilled. She wanted a line, a reaction, a crack in the surface. But I gave her nothing. She cleared her throat, eyes glinting. Anyway, to those who came to support us, thank you. We'll remember who showed up for us, truly. A not-so-subtle swing. She handed the mic back. Applause came late and thin. Like people weren't sure if clapping was endorsement or escape. Ashley returned to her seat, lifting her chin like she'd regained ground. But the terrain had shifted, not just for her, for all of them. Because as the night moved on, something peculiar happened. People began approaching me, not loudly, not publicly, but quietly, in twos, in whispers. A cousin I hadn't spoken to since college came over, touching my shoulder. That speech, it was overdue. One of Dad's business associates leaned in during dessert. I didn't know about what you've done. Impressive. Even the caterer slipped me an extra dessert plate with a wink. It wasn't about glory. It wasn't about revenge, not in the way Ashley understood it. It was about presence. And presence, unlike power, can't be taken. It can only be earned. I didn't move from my chair the rest of the night. I didn't need to. Because now, Ashley was the one orbiting. She might have held the guest list, but I had the gravity, and no amount of forced toast or bridal fanfare could change that anymore. It was nearing 9 when the ballroom doors opened again. The music didn't pause. But the people did, not because the staff brought out another dessert course or because a bouquet had fallen. Because of who stepped in, tall, steel gray suit, recognizable, but not from weddings, from television, from magazine covers. From headlines that used words like acquisition and legacy empire and the man who never forgets a favor. He wasn't carrying a gift. He wasn't looking for Ashley. He was looking for me. The moment he spotted me, he smiled, walked straight across the ballroom like the rest of them were transparent, like they didn't matter, like this entire elaborate night was just a waiting room until I arrived. Ashley saw him then, her jaw locked. Dad rose slightly in his chair, unsure whether to wave or shrink. Mom's napkin hit the floor. Brittany, he said as he reached me. There you are. He didn't offer a handshake. He leaned down and kissed me on the cheek. Not in a flirty way, in a public way, in a way that said, I'm here because of her and because of what she's done. You didn't tell me it was a family event, he added, voice low, amused. I smiled softly. I didn't think you'd come if I did. He laughed, then turned toward the table of Ashley's bridal party and offered a nod that made 3 of them nearly drop their wine. Sorry I'm late, he said to me alone. Board ran long, but I made time. Every syllable carried weight, the kind you can't buy with rented chairs or satin centerpieces. Ashley rose from her seat now, visibly rattled. She walked over slowly, cautious, as if unsure whether this was rescue or invasion. I'm Ashley, she said, extending a hand that trembled slightly. He took it for exactly half a second. Of course, he replied coolly. You must be Brittany's sister. Ashley froze, because that sentence was the end of her sentence. It told the room everything they needed to know, not who I knew, but who knew me and why. He glanced around then. Did I miss the toasts? No, I said. You arrived right on time." And he smiled like he knew exactly what that meant. Because he did. He'd seen the reports, he'd seen the numbers. He knew what I'd built from scratch. Without help, without cheerleaders, without a family willing to bet on anyone but the daughter with perfect hair and sharp elbows. Mason stood and extended his hand. They shook. Two men, both powerful, both connected. To me. Ashley looked smaller now, not because anyone said so, but because the world had shifted and she was the only one who hadn't noticed. Or rather, she noticed too late. The ballroom dimmed as dinner officially ended and the dance floor opened. But the real spotlight, it had already moved, and this time, it wasn't going back. Ashley moved like she was sleepwalking, but her eyes were wide open. She didn't even wait for the MC this time, just stalked across the floor, heels stabbing each polished tile, and snatched the mic before the next song could start. "Sorry," she said, too loud, breath-catching. "Just one more thing." The DJ froze mid-cue. Guests turned slowly, confused, wary. Even the staff paused. Ashley stood alone in the center of the dance floor now, bridal train pooling behind her like a white echo of pride. Her hand trembled as she raised the mic again. "I wasn't going to say this," she began, "but I think it's important, especially after everything that's just happened." No one moved. Even the man in the gray suit watched with mild curiosity, like someone surveying a chessboard one move before checkmate. "I love my sister," Ashley said, teeth almost clenched. "We've had our differences, but I never wanted any of this to become a spectacle." Her eyes darted toward me. I didn't blink. "I just think there's a time and place for personal achievements," she said, and maybe this wasn't it. Gasps didn't come, just silence, heavy, loaded silence. Then I stood, not fast, not loud, just steady. The sound of my chair moving was the only reply her words got. "I agree," I said clearly. No mic, no raised voice, just clarity. "This wasn't the time," she exhaled like she'd won something, until I kept going. "This should have been a celebration, not a measurement." I stepped closer, voice still even, almost gentle. "But if we're measuring, let's be honest about what's on the scale." Ashley stiffened. "You told everyone I was unfit to be maid of honor. You told them I didn't understand family values, that I wouldn't know how to show up." I turned to the guests now. "I showed up." No one looked away. "I paid for the emergency florist when the original vendor ghosted." A murmur. "I covered the shuttle service when Dad said the budget was tight. I coordinated the menu when the venue double booked." Another murmur, louder. Ashley stepped back. "I didn't do it for applause. I did it because that's what people do when they love someone, even if that love isn't always returned." Her face flinched. "But I also stayed quiet, too long, because I was taught that family comes first, even when it forgets you." My voice cracked just once, then steadied. "I'm not here to ruin anything. I'm here to reclaim what's mine. Not your approval, not your spotlight, but my place." I turned to the man in the gray suit, then to Mason, then back to my sister. "And I'm done asking." I walked off the floor without waiting for applause. And that was the final shift. The applause came anyway, soft at first, then fuller, not performative, not out of pity, but real, earned. Because for once, everyone saw the story for what it was. And they knew whose name was really on the invitation. My mother stood first. She didn't look at me. She adjusted her shawl like a curtain falling and whispered something to Dad that no one else could hear. He hesitated, but then he followed. They walked past the cake table like it was invisible. Didn't wait for the sparkler finale. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't even flinch as the guests moved silently aside to let them pass. Ashley trailed after them, veil slightly crooked, shoes in one hand, bouquet abandoned on a chair she'd never sit in again. No screaming, no tears, just exit. The ballroom didn't collapse. It exhaled. Mason approached me quietly. "Do you want to go?" I shook my head. "No, I want to dance." He didn't say anything, just extended his hand. The next 2 hours became something no one had expected. Laughter, freedom. Guests who had come out of obligation stayed out of surprise. Some hugged me. Some apologized. Some said nothing but nodded in a way that meant everything. The man in the gray suit left quietly around midnight. Before he did, he pressed a card into my hand and said, "Whenever you're ready to make it bigger." I didn't even look at it, just tucked it into my clutch and smiled. Sometime after 1, the DJ announced the last dance, but I stayed, even as the tables emptied. Even as the staff began clearing plates, even as the band packed up and the candles burned low, I stayed. Not because I didn't have anywhere else to go, because I didn't need to go anywhere to feel seen anymore. This room, this exact, ridiculous, over-decorated ballroom that had been meant to stage someone else's victory, had become mine. Not because I took it, because I stopped giving it away. The story doesn't end with revenge. It doesn't even end with applause. It ends with presence, with not flinching, with standing in your own name after a lifetime of being told it wasn't enough. I didn't walk out that night, I walked through it. Every step echoing a version of me that once thought love had to be earned by shrinking. I don't shrink anymore. That night, I danced in my heels until they blistered, then barefoot until the lights came on, and when the final song faded and the staff began to dim the chandeliers, I walked over to the cake, cut a slice, sat alone at a corner table, and ate it slowly. Because sometimes the last word isn't loud, it's quiet, certain, unapologetic.